strawberry bicycle shop. Spent so much
Emmett Theater, I was there for every, all through high school. Let's see,
Oh,
not me,
oh.
but I'll be
I was
helping.
like, oh, okay.
I'll help, but I got other projects. They asked me about some of that, so. She's having a great time in Florida.
I know. Almost up there. Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I have to show them these things. This is amazing. I know what this is.
Good evening. I would like to call the February, I'll get my dates right. February 1st Planning Commission meeting to order. Please note that this meeting is being hosted through live stream on the city's website and by teleconference via Zoom. I would like to remind the Planning Commission to have their microphones turned on and positioned so the audience can hear when you're talking. Director King, may we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Commissioner Hill is absent with notice. Commissioner Lemke,
Present.
Commissioner Beamsterfer,
Here.
Vice Chair Van Arsdale, Chair Worth.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Roll call. Commissioner Lemke, would you please lead us? I'm sorry.
Invocation.
Invocation and flag salute.
Good and loving God, we thank you for creating the world in all its beauty. We thank you for memory, which enables us to build on the experiences of the past, for imagination, which admits us to wider world than we could otherwise know, and for foresight, by which we plan for the future. Bless this work that we do on behalf of our community so that we can strive to make a difference in our city. Amen. Please face the flag. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes. Are there any comments or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, entertain a motion.
Approval of the minutes of January 18th.
I'll second.
Motion carries 4-0. All right, public comment period. Agenda item number 5 is a public comment period for items that are not on the agenda. Are there any members of the public present that would like to comment on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, are there any members of the public joining via teleconference or Zoom that would like to comment?
Are there any members on our Zoom that would like to comment on an item right now?
Right now, were there any e-comments received? No e-comments. All right.
No comments.
We'll move into item 6A, specific plan amendment for the downtown specific plan 16-001. Good evening.
Okay. Good evening, Chair, members of the Planning Commission, and the public. I'm Monique Alanis Flater. The project before you is specific plan amendment 22-001 for the downtown specific plan, specific plan number 16001. The applicant is the city of Hemet. It is a city initiated proposal. The location is within the downtown specific plan area. The initiated request involves three amendments. The first involves allowance of retail in office professional mixed use parcels that front along Acacia Avenue and Santa Fe Street. Currently, the code only allows retail along Florida Avenue if you are zoned office professional mixed use. The second amendment is with regards to restaurants, allowance of restaurants with drive-through in the downtown village, subject to a conditional use permit. And the third amendment is a zone change from institutional to downtown commercial for a property that we will overview in a moment. This is the proximity of the downtown specific plan area. The downtown specific plan area is bounded by Oakland to the north, Gilbert Street to the west, Santa Fe Street to the east, and Acacia Avenue to the south. The general plan land use designation varies throughout the downtown, and it comprises of mixed use, commercial, community commercial, office professional, and low medium density residential land use designations, as well as high density or medium density residential. For the purpose of this discussion this evening, we will break out the subject properties into property A, B, C, and D. The first amendment is for property A. These subject properties are located along Santa Fe Street between Florida Avenue and just north of Latham. These properties are currently zoned office professional. They also have a general plan land use designation of office professional. Currently in the downtown specific plan, retail is permitted. However, it only allows for retail within this zone on Florida Avenue, which is restrictive. These are the subject properties in parcel A. And the proposal is to amend the land use table, the permitted uses table to allow and the appendix notes for this to allow retail sales 20,000 square feet or less, not including vehicle parts sales, to be permitted on parcels not only fronting on Florida Avenue, but Acacia Avenue and Santa Fe Street in the office professional mixed use zone. These properties, the property along Florida, the northwest corner is a bank. To the north of St. John Place and Santa Fe Street is a vacant parcel. The properties on the southwest corner of Latham Avenue and Santa Fe Street are multifamily duplex development. And the property to the northwest corner is a office professional type use.
Can you hold there for a moment? Do you have a question? Do you want to turn your mic on?
Mike's on. Sorry. Okay, so this property, Latham to the north, is already an office use. And the property on Florida is a bank. Which bank, is that Wells Fargo?
Don't know the bank.
Union Bank, okay. And then you have a little bit of land there. You do have the vacant parcels right there on Santa Fe, but then you have multifamily. Historically, this has been hospital influenced and focused. Doctors, office space. And so I was just curious, the parcel on Florida Avenue, and I'm sorry, my laptop's in repair and I can't get my notes that I made about this. I'm just wondering what makes us want to change this kind of zoning.
Please.
Downtown specific plan had lots and lots of meetings, lots and lots of public input, lots and lots of discussions when it was done. I forget what year it was finished, not all that long ago. And there was a lot of thought that went into that. So I want to know what the thought is of why the city wants to change it.
Yes, the city sees an opportunity for more flexibility in the downtown, given that many of the properties are underutilized in the downtown. Although the intended vision for the downtown was to create areas for office professional or medical, they do allow certain retail uses. This would be one of those, the ability for the property owner to have more flexibility should they want to reconfigure the property or reevaluate the uses allowed on the property. We have received interest. We do have a property on the next parcel. This is going to be property B. We currently have an application in for the property located at the northwest corner of Harvard and Acacia. It's a vacant piece of land. The request is for an office retail site. However, the code doesn't allow for that. This also provides more opportunities for residential uses to be converted, not only to retail, but to allow for office professional.
Glad you went to this one, because if you've ever spent time at that corner at the post office, which is right there, State Street, that is a mess. And you add retail and you add high traffic stuff right there, and you've got a real mess. Unless we can get that post office to move, that's what happened across the street at the retail on the southwest corner. When that retail went in, it exacerbated what was going on regarding that post office. So we changed this and we add to it in, I think, a major way, unless we can do something with that post office. That's a nightmare. We need a parking lot. And we are having discussions, actually I'm part of a subcommittee, having discussions with the post office again, that was initiated by Tom Garnella and Russ Brown. We did have the post office agreed in early 2000, right before 9/11, to move the post office to the parcel at Devonshire that the city owns. The city was providing the land, the post office was building a new post office to have a much better configuration, much like the San Jacinto post office. So as I looked through them over the weekend, I have a lot of concern about the changes because of I think what you're putting in there, you're going to end up on the previous one. I think we'll end up with strip center type of commercial. I don't know what other commercial we can have. You had a restaurant, maybe a drive-through restaurant at one. It concerns me a lot about so close to the residential and the traffic patterns that you're gonna have up at the hospital and in these residential areas.
Commissioner, if I could add a little bit to that, the reason why we're proposing this change is not to look at individual specific parcels. What we're saying is that we wanted to add the street Acacia and Santa Fe, giving the opportunity. We're identifying those parcels because of their current use or vacant format. But in the future, it could be changed by existing property owners or existing buildings that can be converted into a different commercial uses. So this is not identifying each individual parcels rather than the street. So as you can see on that note, we're just adding Florida Avenue, fronting Florida Avenue, and we're adding the language, comma, Acacia Avenue and Santa Fe Street in the OPMU zone. So with the current language being Florida being the only street being identified, I believe there's only 2 parcels that could have an opportunity for commercial development. So this way, we're giving a little more opportunity for other streets that can have a commercial component rather than just office use. And that's what the mixed use is really designed to do. Well, and that's why we're here before you. The actual uses, they'll still have to go through the process from the planning division as well as planning commission. What we're adding is just a language for the streets to be added for that possibility in the future. Not that there's any project tied to this proposal, that we're just adding the streets, Acacia and Santa Fe, being that Acacia is one of the major side roads that people traverse, as well as Santa Fe. So we made that as the justification for this recommended request.
This adds the potential for commercial use. Does it also allow for continued use as currently zoned?
Absolutely.
Going back to can you go back to the last slide, because that explanation makes sense in terms of just corridor. Is this is the same thing here in regards to Acacia Avenue and Santa Fe? Where's Acacia? I don't. Right.
This is by Santa Fe.
Right, the bank, but the wording says Santa Fe and
Yes.
Acacia.
So there's 2 parts, there's 2 areas that would be in fact affected by the zone, by the specific plan amendment. Property A, all these properties are zoned office professional mixed use, as well as the properties on Acacia.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So the wording is the same for both. So the idea is to open up the corridor of Santa Fe and the corridor of Acacia to commercial use in addition to its current designation of office.
North Santa Fe still doesn't go all the way through because of the school district property. So you're backing up traffic when you're going for something retail, and they're looking to drive traffic there.
In this area, are there any property owners that reached out to the city, or has there been any discussion with the current property owners as to this change of designation, that they would either agree or disagree or have any input on that?
Well, the current zoning that they have right now on all those properties will not change. So their current use and the listed uses that are under the OPMU zone will still be allowed based on the downtown Hemet specific plan. What we're adding is that retail component with the possibility of future. Not that this will change permanently, not that this is what the city's direction is, but we're giving a little more flexibility built into it, rather than just having Florida Avenue as the primary and main retail. We're pulling Acacia and Santa Fe as the side roads and giving those property owners with the OPMU zone an additional option for future development.
Question. So I think this law I don't have questions on, but she's right about the state and acacia part. I do, because the flexibility is great. We want to try to accommodate, we want to try to, inspire people to come. However, right there on a state and acacia, it's already kind of a nightmare. So if we're enticing people to come on a different, I am concerned about that. Is there a plan, I guess, and it would just be the post office leaving really, because that parking lot's terrible.
It'd be the post office leaving, and it would also be the conditional use permit process that we
Yeah,
would
sure, of course.
opportunity to review.
Sorry.
On this particular one, though, this is a with the mixed use as what we were, from what I'm understanding, where it could be commercial and residential area.
Yes.
So I know in a lot of other research and a lot of other cities run into the issue of commercial use to where the residents have a tendency of parking in the retail spots to where it's blocking the business for the business to have the parking area, and which creates a lot of traffic jam because a lot of residents park there. And I know, like with the corner lot there with Santa Fe and Acacia, those are kind of smaller lots anyways, because I just think there's a couple houses on there. But that's one of my concerns, is because it is a busy area in just the parking layout of that for having retail in that corner. That's
Yeah.
just one issue I have. It's just the parking. A lot of cities had those issues with mixed uses.
Right. And again, let me try to address it in a couple different points. One is that the residential use generally have parking uses overnight, where retail uses are during the day. So even if they did share, they would have an opposite time frame, so they won't create its own conflict. Now, having said that, we do require that they provide certain parking for residential development, commercial development, and so on. So they would have to meet certain criteria within that downtown Hemet specific plan in order to meet all the necessary requirements, including parking for the area. Now, if you look at northeast corner of State and Acacia, those are medical building offices, and they have their own parking spaces provided, and they function as an independent a node, if you will. And they don't have any concerns or issues. What's causing the problem right at this point is that the post office doesn't have adequate parking for the services that they provide, which then funnels out to other areas and nearby. With the development of some of these vacant lots, they may have an additional opportunity to have parkings that, even if the post office left that location, another retail center can have a shared parking through different means so that it will minimize the number of street parking that's occurring on Acacia. So it really is an opportunity for different businesses, different parts of the blocks to work together and provide that continuity of shared parking, accessibility, and services that can be provided without driving so far. The general consensus of a downtown area is that people tend to walk to their commercial needs or their office needs. So that's counted for this type of use. So not everybody coming to those facilities may drive. Some of them may be walking to those facilities. So those are all counted within the downtown area. It kind of creates that feel of, I park my car, I only take my car somewhere else when I go far, but everything in that area within a block or two, I should be able to walk to all my services.
Isn't that northwest corner, aren't those residential on the northwest corner?
Northeast corner.
Sorry, you said northeast.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Northwest corner, those are both residential.
Correct. And that could potentially turn into a office building, which they still can because we're not changing the zoning. It's still an OPMU, or it can stay as current as a residential development. So it's just giving that extra opportunity to add Acacia and Santa Fe into this language and not limiting it just on Florida Avenue.
Yeah, my thought is that considering that any of these would need to go through the conditional use process, that gives an opportunity to review them at that point. And they got really good tacos at that place. I don't.
So we
Such as
just
curfews and
had
stuff.
our gas station issue out on, and then it was on Florida Avenue, but it was butting right up to some houses. Are you going to be excluding gas stations from this type of thing because it's in neighborhoods, or are gas stations going to be possible CUP uses?
I believe the downtown specific plan does not allow gas stations.
It's not. So the types of permitted uses in the office professional include some retail components. The gasoline service station is not a permitted use. Health and fitness centers, medical, office, business, professional, pharmacies, radio station, restaurants without or with or without alcohol sales, as well as some retail services that are oriented towards personal care, wholesale, educational, museums and libraries, and other ancillary uses.
Great. Thank you. We'll probably continue here. We'll have probably a few more slides and a few more questions.
So this is, we're going to proceed to property C. And this is a different and a separate type of amendment. This is for properties located in the downtown village area, illustrated here. The recommendation is to allow for a restaurant with a drive-through, subject to a conditional use permit. In this particular area, this area has been underutilized for quite some time in some areas. Many of the property owners find it difficult, to land assembly their properties. There may be other opportunities, not necessarily the entire area that's illustrated here. For the purpose of this discussion, this is the area that is zoned downtown village. And the amendment would allow for the drive-through with a restaurant with drive-through subject to the CUP. Just to allow for revitalization of underdeveloped properties, to increase the usability of the properties, which could create a catalyst to activate the downtown.
Holistically, that portion right there, the drive-throughs generally aim for a corner. I'm just trying to think realistically, where would our choices be? Right there?
Yeah. Possibly here. Those are currently open areas, although it has a parcel separation, but this is a large open area, a couple buildings. City did miss an opportunity at this location in the past, but majority of this is already built out, so you wouldn't have an opportunity to provide a drive-through. You just don't have enough land area to do that.
Inez, you said you missed an opportunity. What was that?
That was a potential drive-through drugstore.
Next to the shoe store?
Correct. So again, what we're trying to do is create opportunity, not that this is what's going to happen, but giving those property owners a little extra flexibility in how they market their property.
Property site D. This property is located south of Florida Avenue on the east side of Gilbert Street. It's a triangular shaped property. Was previously utilized as a diesel fueling station. The current zone for the downtown is institutional, which is incompatible with the actual land use designation of community commercial, as well as the types of permitted uses for institutional. In this case, we just recommended that this property zone be cleaned up to allow to be zoned to the downtown commercial, to be consistent with the downtown, and allow for the property owner to have more flexibility. We did communicate with the property owners of this property, and they are in support of this proposal.
I would assume so.
So how many property owners did you talk to when you're getting ready to make this?
Downtown specific plan, based on the area and the parameters set forth in our municipal code. When you have more than so many properties impacted, the requirement is to notify within the newspaper notification in the press enterprise.
But is it,
But you talked directly to this owner? here?
Property owner is aware, and they've communicated with us.
Said it earlier, the lack of discussion for these changes when we had a lot of discussion for when the specific plan went into place. That's concerning to me.
So
I'm
the-
glad to hear you talk to the owner direct here.
Yeah, so the only change on this property is actual zone change. All the other properties are staying exactly the same. So their zone does not change. So as they see their property currently, they can continue that operation, or they have a little more flexibility in adding another feature or another option to exercise to develop that parcel. This is the only property that we are actually changing the zoning designation. So that's why we had talked to the property owner itself.
so just to clarify a point that you made there, I think within all of these property sites, this one's a little different because it's a change from one to another. And I appreciate that the dialogue that with the property owner, because it changes what they can do. But with all of the other ones, it only opens up what they can do. It does not prohibit them from doing anything that they currently do now.
That is correct.
Okay.
Sometimes I've got too much history and I know it. Talked about downtown and what could be thought about residential with commercial underneath. We thought about, the combination of residential with office underneath. Those kind of things that make some downtowns, more functional and also keep you from having to drive everywhere. You can work right there. It's just adding that retail component, giving somebody an option can sometimes sound really good right now. That's great to have some more options. But down the road, somebody comes in and says, well, but a gas station would work really good here and it's retail, or a shopping center right here on this corner would work great. And the post office needs to move, but moving them is like getting them out of a bunker, believe me. So I just am hesitant because of all of that history that's gone on down here. And again, all the thought that went into it, and being more flexible is important sometimes, but sometimes it can give you unintended consequences. And I'm trying to think of those. I'm not trying to make them up. I'm just trying to think of what could be unintended consequences that we create by doing it.
At that point, I want to clarify two more points if I could, that I heard. I just want to make sure that I heard them correctly. Number one is that all of these changes does not allow for gas stations, first off. And then secondly, that any proposed use would need to go through the public hearing process for a conditional use permit and go through this. There's no ministerial approval on any of these, correct?
Currently, the downtown specific plan does allow for retail permitted by right in every other zone in the downtown, except the office professional mixed use restriction.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yes, so retail is a permitted use. Almost 90% of the downtown allows for retail sales. The office professional mixed use has its own restriction apart from the other zones in the downtown, which is
Gotcha.
highly restrictive, and only allows for retail on Florida. This would allow for it to be permitted by right. And that's the proposal.
Permitted by right, so it would not go through the conditional use permit.
It would only go through the conditional use permit process for if the use within it of itself required a conditional use permit. There could be a site development review requirement for it to go through that would be in alignment with the specific plan criteria and city review. There are limited uses in the office professional mixed use that require a conditional use permit. For example, a health fitness club that would require a conditional use permit. But most of the other types of uses are permitted as without a discretionary approval process
Without discretionary approval.
for this particular zone.
So commissioners, like the other zones, there are permitted uses, conditionally permitted uses, and administratively use permits, as well as non-permitted uses. Some of the examples I can give you are alcohol sales is a permitted use. Alcohol sales other than on sale and off sale alcohol sales is a conditionally permitted use. So even though within the same alcohol use, one is permitted and one is conditionally permitted based on the type of use. So items that are not allowed in the OPMU zone is antique shops and collectibles. So it's restricting what can be done on an OPMU, and all we're trying to do is provide a little more flexibility in that makeup. Now, I hear you're concerned, Commissioner Van Arsdale, but in order for someone to create a large area that encompasses a drive-through, say gas station, even though it's not permitted, let's just take that as an example, they would have to acquire multiple pieces of property in order to have adequate land area in order to provide that type of service based on current and today's requirements. So within a downtown, because the buildings are so tight to one another, there are no really setbacks, they're right up to the sidewalk, if you will. It would be very, very difficult for someone to acquire those pieces of property in order to create a large type of use encompassing 4, 5, 6, 10 parcels together. So the only opportunity that we have are pieces that are currently not developed, that has a large open space or open area that they can revamp and utilize, because it has been vacant for a number of decades. So those are the only opportunities that we're trying to provide. Now, yes, there can be a potential in the future that a use will come before you. And there is a potential for a use that not come before you based on the current designation in the OPMU, which we are not changing. That's how it was adopted. We're not changing any of that.
Your history is not is spectacular, so don't.
What's that?
So your history is spectacular, so don't worry. But yeah, you know, that like we were just talking before the planning commission meeting, the history of our valley and kind of that downtown corridor, trying to preserve it and revive it within the spirit of our history, I think is the intent of everybody on this commission, and what we're concerned about. And I understand that. And that's why I wanted to clarify those 2 points, is that something would come through the process without having an option for a public review, would we be stuck with whatever was approved. So that I understand your point that it would be difficult to do that. It's just it's the idea that, you know, we're losing more and more as a local agency the opportunity to manage what we approve and what is built, and don't like to give up that guidance. So anyways, Monique, if you want to continue, I think this is just the first agenda item too. So
Yeah, so I will conclude that we did provide notice on January 20th in the press enterprise, and not to mailing. There was not mailed, and we have received 1 letter of support for the rezone for the industrial to commercial, downtown commercial, from the SoCal Group Inc., which are the owners of the property located at 148 South Gilbert Avenue. The property is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, section 15162, and the overall proposal is consistent with the mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring program for the downtown specific plan. This concludes my presentation. Staff is recommending the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending approval to the City Council for the specific plan amendment 22-001, including finding that the project is categorically exempt. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
thank you very much. Got a pretty good chance to get questions in during the process, but are there any additional questions for staff? Okay, let's go ahead and open up public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to speak to this? Is there anybody online or any e-comments received?
I did not receive any e-comments. Is there anyone joining us through Zoom that would like to comment right now? I don't see any.
Thank you. Hearing that, we'll close public hearing. All right, discussion, thoughts, comments.
I feel like the mics aren't very loud because it was really hard to hear her. Is that nothing we can do? I want to make sure everybody's being heard, and
We
but-
checked with IT and it is being broadcast. It's just a little low in this room.
okay, perfect. No, I know we were able to ask you a ton of questions. Sorry.
For what it's worth, Planning Commission, I can hear you just fine.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Just a real quick, probably a stupid question, but I know with residential, they have certain curfews, they have certain things they can't do after certain hours, and retail has their certain rules, and then office professional has their rules. Is there anything that's in conflict between office professional mixed use with the downtown Pacific plan and what reference to retail or what curfews are and noise?
Sure, let me try to answer that. The component that we're requesting to add that language of Acacia and Santa Fe, the retail sales store of 20,000 square feet or less is a permitted use currently in the Hemet downtown specific plan. It has a little number 8 on next to that P, which is a permitted use. When you go down the list, it identifies where they can have that 20,000. So all we're doing is we're not adding a new type of use. All we're doing is providing a street of Acacia in addition to Florida and Santa Fe. So we're just adding the street. The use is already in there. It's already been identified through the specific plan, the relationship between that particular zone and the residential zone, the noise factor, the use and compatibility factors all have been counted for within the original downtown specific plan. What you may find is that the residential component within the downtown area have some understanding, if you will, generally for folks that are living in a higher dense population or a higher dense area, they accept certain level of hindrance, if you will. So a noise factor will go up because walls are stuck from one to another. There's not a separation. It's not a single family detached home like we've experienced in the ARCO AMPM design. These are right next to one another. They're stuck together. They're designed for that type of use, or they're designed to have a very walkable frontage of all these buildings. So when you have residential next to a downtown or downtown residential in the downtown specific plan, there's certain understanding and there's certain uses that you accept by moving into those areas. And also people move into those areas because of those reasons of being able to walk to get their services. And that could be retail, that could be entertainment, that could be employment, that could be a number of different things.
But does this action change anything that's currently there?
No, because we're not changing any zoning. We're not changing the
We're not changing it now, but we're allowing it to be changed in the future.
Well,
no. So all we're doing is, because it's already identified that, stating that that type of use is a permitted use within that zone. So that retail component is already permitted within that zone. But when you go to the subsection, it only limits to Florida Avenue.
And there was a real good reason why it was done that way.
Yeah. And so what we're trying to do is, because all the downtown area is not filling up and there's not a lot of opportunity for, because all the Florida Avenue side has been filled up. There are very few vacant buildings remaining along Florida Avenue. But we do have areas that could be developed in the future for any type of use. Now, this does not mean that it will become only retail. It could be service, it could be doctor's office, it could be a mixed use. That part does not change. So all we're doing is adding those two streets of Acacia, which is a secondary thoroughfare for the downtown area, and Santa Fe as being the secondary thoroughfare. Yes, it does not go through to the north section, but it is a signalized intersection through Florida Avenue, and many workers, employees, residents utilize Santa Fe as one of the connectors going north and south because there's signalized intersection. So those are the components that we looked at in order to bring that forward. But it is up to the commission how you would like to move the item forward.
But we have, you mentioned something that kind of, you said that people who move into these areas accept that they might have these type of businesses, retail, offices, etc., come into their neighborhoods because they moved into a downtown area. And we've got to recognize that that downtown area particularly started in 1911. We're over 100 years old, 110, 11. So there's the configuration was primarily residential off Florida Avenue and Harvard. Let's not forget that Harvard was one of our main streets. But it was residential, and it was meant to be residential around it. So we have started encroaching into that residential with the liquor store across from the post office, the commercial on that corner, all the things that have started coming in. So, and the thoroughfares, Acacia and Devonshire and Latham are busy thoroughfares enough as it is. And there's a difficult art of combining the residential with the high traffic areas and then adding more retail, which gives you more traffic into all of this area. I don't know, maybe what I'm looking for is a town hall meeting with this whole area advertised saying, come and let's talk about some changes that we think might be a good idea for your neighborhoods. I don't know exactly what I'm looking for, but I'm having a lot of heartburn with this change.
Let me add a little more to that. The retail center that's on the southwest corner of State and Acacia is outside of the downtown. So is the post office that's outside of the downtown. So the street that we're identifying, Acacia, is actually a border street from the downtown Hemet specific plan to the general city zoning area. So we can't limit what goes on across the street through the downtown specific plan. No, it's okay. So what we're trying to do is
Pull that PowerPoint back up.
yeah. So what we're trying to do is to be consistent with what's around it. I understand, Commissioner Van Arsdale, when you talk about those other streets, that they were generally residential in the past, which is true, but the dynamics have been changing, just like you see on the south side of Acacia and the west of State Street. That's not in the specific plan, yet that turned into a commercial retail. And so now we're kind of creating an island within the downtown specific planned area that is bordered on the other side as a retail, but on one side in the downtown, it's residential and office. So this particular zoning, office professional mixed use, just kind of mimics that. Yes, it could be residential, it could be office, it could be mixed use, it could be part.
Kind of already that way.
Yes.
But when you come to these concentrated corners,
Mhm.
that's when it does start to make sense. You're trying to justify it over here on Santa Fe, and I can kind of see that there's an office,
Mhm.
but then you've got the middle school there, and you've
Mhm.
got some other things there that are somewhat concerning. So again, I just like I say, maybe I'm looking for more communication with the property owners and residents in that area to get a feel for it, since we had so much cooperation in the past. It's on. Can you hear me? Okay. Sorry. Yeah, it's on. So that's just that's why I just know that the whole downtown was such an important, it was so important to get the specific plan going, specific plan so that people would have a sense of the downtown, a focus on downtown to try to do revitalization and all those kind of things. And I appreciate that what you're trying to do is allow for some more flexibility. I certainly agree with the to the north of the railroad tracks, Inez, that whole area is I think appropriately focused for this type of thing. I don't disagree with that at all. So anyway, I'll quit because it is 7 o'clock and we are still on item 1.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit that. One of the things for me was the discussion with the property owners, and what is it that is there any input from them.
And one last thing, the churches, the number of churches in this area they're very concentrated. There's a lot of them, a lot of churches. So that could be another discussion we have some time with them.
Director King, I have a question on the 2 residential lots. Is the idea for including them in this action? Just get it done at one time. I mean, those are people's residences.
No, that's not the intent. The zoning is already what it is. All we're doing is adding the street. Not that we're picking certain parcels. We're just adding the acacia, and those happen to fall with the zoning and the street. So it has the potential, but we're not picking on any one or 2 particular parcels. We're just identifying acacia, and acacia, by identifying that, the OPMU just happens to fall on those 2 parcels that are already zoned OPMU. That's why we were identifying it, not that we're picking those pieces or those properties as a specific change or impacted. All we're saying is, if you add acacia and you already have OPMU, these are the parcels that will be affected.
Well, I mean, my thought in general is that retail on Florida is great, but it's already hard to get parking to go into retail on Florida, and you end up having to go into some of these other areas to park to be able to access it. And so I personally am do things. The one thing that really concerns me is just the lack of public input when those projects come in. And I'll keep saying that over and over and over again, but that's the stuff that really, I understand it's a permitted use, but especially in certain sensitive areas like the downtown specific plan where there's something more there. That's what concerns me a little bit.
That's what we have here right now, is that, and not that we're doing something that's so huge that you can't deal with it or fix it, but that's what we have, in my opinion, right now, because we have something that's going to affect these neighborhoods could be in a major way. And I guess, there was a lot of that input, and now we would be changing without considering that right now. Well, that's what we would be doing.
Chair, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, it's Steve Graham. I don't know if you guys can see me. I'm your legal counsel for this evening, coming in remote due to COVID.
We can't see you. No, now we can.
You can see me? Great. Hi. So I've been watching you guys for about an hour. Sorry for not chiming in earlier. I can tell there's a lot of concerns with the A and B part of the proposal. I did want to speak to the parcel D. That's the triangular parcel that's currently zoned as institutional. This is a parcel that I've been dealing with the property owner's attorney on for going on 6 months now. It's unclear exactly when that parcel was zoned institutional. I believe it came during the specific plan when it was adopted. But as you can tell, it's been owned and operated by a private company for its entire existence. When you look at the allowable uses for institutional, they're primarily public uses for the city. So libraries, fire stations, police stations, things like that. That company has been winding up their business. and trying to sell the parcel. But because it is zoned essentially as a public use, there's no market for it because nobody can develop it. So they approached our office and asked if they could transfer the property to the city. Unfortunately, there's no real use the city has for it at this time. And so that was the impetus for rezoning that one to be commensurate with the other commercial uses in the specific plan area. And I just wanted to let you know that that property owner has been waiting very patiently for several months for this specific plan amendment to go
Can you
through.
repeat that? I'm sorry, can you repeat that last sentence? That property owner has been what?
Patiently waiting for several months for this specific plan amendment to go through. Now, obviously, I can tell the Planning Commission has some questions, some concerns about other aspects of this amendment. My only request would be that if the Planning Commission felt that they didn't want to proceed with the retail allowances on Acacia or with the drive-through, I would ask that the Planning Commission at least proceed forward on the specific plan amendment as to parcel D.
Gotcha, thank you.
And we do have a letter of support from that property owner. So they are fully apprised of what the proposal is and they're fully in support. They just want to have marketable property.
Sure, absolutely. And I think the commission's primary concern, well, Commissioner Van Arsdale's primary concern is with the Acacia and State Street.
Yeah,
corridor.
Acacia and State Street. Like I said, I don't have a lot of heartburn over the north of the railroad tracks. You know, there at Gilbert, Inez, all of those. The railroad tracks seem to be kind of the barrier between the residential and the semi, you know, retail stuff that's to the north of it. And SoCo, gosh, I haven't heard that name in a long time. With Nick and all of them there at SoCo was, I mean, they've been the user all along, and they've just kind of silently existed forever.
So is there, I mean, considering that we have current discussions going on with the post office for the area that's outside of the downtown specific plan, does it make sense to move this forward, approving A, B, and D, I guess it is? And then coming back to revisit that once the C, I hope I got the letters right.
Acacia's B.
Sorry?
State and Acacia's B.
So does it make sense to move forward with A, C, and D, which is the fast food restaurants with drive-through, the Inez and up to Latham, and then the project on Gilbert, the parcel on Gilbert? Does it make sense to move forward with that and defer the B until a later point when a decision is made or more progress is made with the discussions on the post office, and maybe a little bit more discussion with those specific parcel owners in that area to get their input and feedback?
Sure. So if I hear you correctly, then we'll add the language of Santa Fe, but not Acacia, and approve the drive-through and the change of zone.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and the
Go ahead.
change of zone from I to DC. Those okay.
Well, D, I guess it's D and Inez. Yeah, I wish I could get into my packet.
D is that weird corner lot.
Yeah,
That's
that's that
the one they need.
triangular corner. I don't have trouble with that. I still have a little heartburn over drive-through stuff in the areas that we're looking at, but I would be willing to consider that. So if we split it, did those and leave out the Acacia and State Street that are all right there.
Okay, so then the new proposal, let me read this out to you. City initiated amendment SPA 22-001 to the downtown specific plan 16-001 to allow retail sales 20,000 square feet or less, not including vehicle part sale, to be permitted on parcels that front crossing off Acacia Avenue, Santa Fe Street, in addition to Florida Avenue within the office professional mixed-use zone. The amendment also includes restaurant with drive-through in the downtown village DV zone as an approved use, subject to the conditional use permit, and zone change is for the institutional to downtown commercial DC for a 0.51 acre property located on the east side of Gilbert Avenue, north of Kimball Avenue, APN 443-271-006.
So moved.
Second.
Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Okay. Next item is zone change 21-004 for the State Street corridor area. David, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm Dave Leonard, contract planner for the city, presenting this application. This is change of zone case 21-004. This is a proposal also initiated by the city of Hemet. It involves 34 parcels. Most of those are owned by the Riverside County Housing Authority. They're on the west side of State Street between the Hemet Vistas Apartments and the West Oakland Avenue. And you see the listed numbers of APNs below that. As I have appeared before you before, this is a continuing part of the SB2 planning grant program. It's an implementation effort to streamline housing approvals and to accelerate housing production. And it makes these properties eligible for residential development under the objective design and development standards through SB 35 that you approved earlier or later, late last year. The city initiative proposal is to amend the existing zoning map to the area north of Menlo from office professional to R3, and the area between Menlo and Oakland from C2 general commercial to R3. And these parcels combined total 26.93 acres, the general plan designation through all of this area's mixed use. Looking at the north block, the area north of Menlo, it consists of 7.76 vacant acres. It is 6 parcels. It is owned by Palm Communities, who has appeared before you in previous hearings, and they are ready to submit a 152 unit workforce housing project upon adoption of the zone change. And they're also intending to go through the AB 35 process.
That's Menlo and
Menlo and State.
that's presently the mobile home park.
No, that's south of Menlo. I'll be getting to that in a minute. This is the building with the white roof in the middle. That's the Housing Authority office. And below that is their parking lot. And then there's a vacant, pretty much vacant commercial right at Menlo and State Street.
The Red Dog Saloon.
North, on the north side.
North side,
So that's on the second section.
yes. And where Palm Communities intends to submit plans is the area that you see in purple on the plan. We are presently in discussions with them on a regular basis to define that process, and that's leading up to their future application. Now we go to the south side. This is 16.79 acres. Menlo is on the north boundary. West Oakland Avenue is on the south boundary. The mobile home park is at the corner, which I'll get to in an aerial map in a moment. And then there's some scattered residential, which I'll point out in a minute. Also, the Riverside County Housing Authority owns the majority of these parcels. There's about 28 assessor parcels, but only about 22 of them are developable. Some of them are just sliver lots. No, there are no development plans proposed at this time, although the zoning may be a catalyst. Here's an aerial photo where you can now see the mobile home park on the southwest corner of Menlo and State Street. And see if I thought there was a point of it. I just want to point out that the
Would you like to use
the mobile
this?
home park is where the light was. And there's if you go down on Alessandro Road that forms the eastern or the western boundary, about midway down, there's a single family residence right above the light. And then down along Oakland, you can see that at the bottom, there's 3 single family residences there. Those are included in the zone change. And there's a commercial parcel that you can see at the corner that is not included.
So can you just go back there? Okay, so years ago when we worked with the Riverside County on this, and then to the south of this parcel is the stock farm. And the stock farm is a specific plan zone.
Correct.
And they have a specific plan that was quite a nice specific plan. And it did include, and this in the past had included commercial on the frontage of State Street, which was appropriate in my opinion. And then in the back was housing and a focused senior community development from the county was working on. So what you're asking us to do is change it so that it's all high density multi-unit
Yes,
and no commercial on the frontage.
except at the corners. But the density that's allowed presently under the mixed use zone is sufficiently high to accommodate multiple family residential without requiring a general plan amendment. So we would be working within the maximum densities are already assigned to these properties.
So basically what we would be eliminating is the potential for commercial on State Street.
Other than the corners, yes.
I thought when we discussed this, that's been a while, but I recall there being some exhibits and some renderings of the concept of commercial downstairs and residential upstairs. And I thought that was along this State Street corridor.
It would be, that would be part of the stock farm specific plan. They have loft housing
That was
products.
what we had discussed continuing on to the north. In the past, we discussed that with the county because all, like he said, all this is owned by the county. And we looked at that specific plan that the stock farm had, which was quite a nice and very long time planning that they went through. Scott Garrett, who's part of the Garrett Group, or he's the son of Paul Garrett of the Garrett Group. They had quite a nice plan. See down below there, it goes all the way over. So that plan is specific plan all through there, but it included Great Heritage Park that preserves some of that stock farm. And then it included that kind of residential top and commercial at the bottom. And then it includes some nice commercial on the frontage.
What is the zoning required to have that type of a commercial below and a,
Mixed use.
but that would not be allowed here?
No, well, I'm not familiar enough with the R3 zone to know if that is a allowable use within it, but I'm pretty sure it would be the mixed use. What we are reducing the flexibility of the range of uses allowed within this zone change. The reason for that is these are opportunity sites to help meet our unit assignments to meet the state requirements. We're also proposing as part of this general area, a transportation hub so that there's transportation in close proximity to a clustered housing. So, and then there'd be commercial component further to the east from here that all intertwines to make a full community of having concentrated populations where there's regional transit and where there's commercial services on a major corridor.
Yeah, I don't think it's an idea of changing it to commercial where you'd have some sort of a shopping center or something like that. I think it's more the idea that that there would be a commercial frontage to State Street being such a main.
I think that's when we talked about when the hub was coming in, that was going to be part of the commercial and all of that. But I think we had always talked about this being high density housing, right?
With the
Frontage of
frontage
commercial.
of commercial with above, that was my understanding.
Correct, because they're concerned about transportation. They want to make sure a lot of people have trouble with transportation and make sure they can get what they needed in a walking distance.
But isn't that the commercial was going into the hub, right?
There is some commercial in the hub that's being proposed.
I think that's what we were, I don't know.
Say
I
it's
don't-
being proposed, it's not.
That's another component of that SB2 grant program. Once we're done with the zoning, our attention is going to really be zeroed in on the TOD transportation hub. Now,
The issue regarding high-density multi-unit is always the properties are managed well. And always, there are some areas that, as you may or may not know, just down the street from here on Oakland, that were not, and they didn't go to the highest density, but they were fourplexes. And please never, ever let anybody plan that kind of property again. It used to be a great idea. Someone would live in one and rent the other three. It was a nest egg for retirement, yada, yada, yada. But those ended up being owned by out-of-town owners individually, and that's what you've got with Rosalia, Oakland, all right in there, and that's a big problem. So putting this much high-density property and cutting, and I don't like cutting out the commercial potential, but I think when it comes to the planning of it and the actual building of it, that we need to make sure that it's managed like the property to the north, who just visited us not too long ago. That's been well managed for a very long time. And just, that's the important part for anything like this. And so if you do this all residential, you do your commercial across the street with the hub of the transportation, not quite so bad. And then you keep the specific plan on the stock farm that has a combination of it.
that's consistent with the aims that we have.
Talking about.
We also have a tremendous advantage. You see the Hemet Vistas project just north of our project area. We know that a similar product line is coming just to the south. It's the same developer, same kind of product concept. There's going to be some updated and stricter standards, but that's basically what we envision going all the way down to Oakland. Not that it's necessarily going to be Palm communities, would be nice if it was, but that kind of concept.
And the possible number of units in all this area here zone.
Our numbers show a potential of 400 units. The reality is, because the development standards and the fact that if it's workforce housing, they can't get into the cost of elevators and subterranean parking and those types of components. So we'll never reach that kind of density. We're looking at under 20 units per acre in terms of what these properties will yield if it's workforce housing based on the standards that we
20 units per acre at 26.
It's about 54. No, about 500. Oh.
But under 20 units. So say 18 per acre. So you're still looking at almost 500 units. But
So I'm kind of in the spirit of the last agenda item. Is there any, if it's designated on the corridor State Street as mixed use, does that preclude you from having R3 high densities? In other words, if you were to carve out a sliver along State Street that would allow for, I mean, most likely if it's all one developer, they're going to want to do one one project and wouldn't want to carve that section out realistically, but
But the existing zoning north of Menlo is office. The existing zoning south of Menlo is general commercial. So those won't allow the multiple family.
right. I'm
The
just saying,
mixed
as,
use would,
I'm
but
saying,
not the zoning.
I'm saying as we're making this change, we're designating it as R3, which is pretty restrictive in terms of what can go there. And so it does not allow for that commercial component underneath.
Well, so let me try to answer that. The current general plan designation is mixed use. So at any point, if you, let's say, let's take that town and country. If someone were to come in and purchase that town and country, say, I want to build a commercial component to that, then all they have to do is request a zone change to turn it back to commercial. What the concept currently is that because these are all owned, majority of it is owned by a one entity, that they have a better opportunity to erase some of these property lines and create a larger project that makes sense in that area. Not necessarily eliminating the commercial component, but it gives that, again, the opportunity for combining and merging all these lots into one developable land area.
So you mentioned the corners would, because that corner is not owned by the county up at the top, right there.
That is correct.
Not one of the parcels owned. Should we leave that as a commercial potential? Because it does make sense. The traffic count, everything on that corner makes sense. It could be a center.
That's our desire, to have some support commercial in those corners to reduce.
So should we dump that parcel number out of it?
It's not in it.
That one is not?
Oh, you mean the mobile home park? That would be up to the commission.
Commissioners, currently it's zone C2 and they're using it as a multifamily residential. So right now it's not consistent with the zoning. So technically they're legal non-conforming.
If you left it C2,
Then they're still legal non-conforming.
still legal
And-
non-conforming, and then you take the rest of all of that, and then you get some of that commercial that you're talking about. And you have the residential all in between it.
I know that in the past, there's been several public comments in regards to that corner and some of the challenges. Does having it in that status give the city any opportunity to address some of those public comments moving forward, versus if we change it to what's being proposed here, then that maybe takes that opportunity away? Does my question make sense?
Yes. So if you were to leave it current, which is C2, then they're legal non-conforming, and there's some non-conforming regulations that would apply if that town country happens to have some calamity in the future, whether that's fire, earthquake, or some type of destruction. Then there's a level of percentage that they need to meet in order to rebuild it back to that. If it exceeds that percentage, then they can't rebuild back to that level. So it would have to go back to the existing zoning regulations, which would then put it at commercial designation. So it is up to the commission whether you want to include that as part of the change, or you could exclude that parcel, being that it's individually owned and not by the county.
I mean, personally, I think excluding that would do two things. Number one is it would provide for some commercial, not owned and controlled by the county. That's not going to be part of this big development. The big development at this point is not planning, correct me if I'm wrong, incorporating that parcel, that lot into their plan at this point.
But we don't know. They may be working on.
Fair enough. But I think to Commissioner Van Arsdale's point, and also to some input that I've received from others, is that there's a desire to maintain some of that commercial component along the State Street. State Street alignment. And so if it's possible to exclude that mobile home park from the zone change, I would certainly be in favor of that. I don't know, does anybody have?
And I think that if you did that and they ended up approaching the owner, including it in it, came back and said, could we change the C2 to R3 and make it all big, one huge project area? I don't think there would be a problem. And if we left it C2 like it is, it still gives some commercial opportunity on State Street that doesn't take the whole section away.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll let you continue. I'm sorry.
Okay.
As you can see, we're not waiting until the end of these
That's,
items for
that's
questions.
just fine. If anybody's listening, then they can see where the conversation's headed in a free flow way. These are the zones that are currently existing: office north of Midlow, C2 commercial south of Midlow, and as proposed. The zone change was considered a project under CEQA, so therefore we had retained Cask Consulting to prepare an initial study. The study concluded that there's no evidence of significant impacts. In fact, there's no mitigations required. This is one of those situations you have a negative declaration being recommended instead of a mitigated negative declaration. It was circulated through the state clearinghouse because it is on a state highway, and we received no comments from the state. We sent letters to the affected property owners within the project area on December the 9th, and we did not receive a response. We advertised in the press enterprise on January 20th, and we also sent notices to property owners within 500 feet. In accordance with AB 52, we circulated to the tribes through a tribal consultation process. Only the Quinchon tribe of Yuma, Arizona responded with no comments, but they would defer to other tribes. We heard nothing further from the other tribes. Lake Hemet Municipal Water District did submit a comment on the initial study locally, indicating that they have a moratorium in place, and that if there's development being proposed, I need to go talk to them. Therefore, it is recommended that the Planning Commission adopt resolutions, one of them being for the adoption of the negative declaration, and the other one for the ordinance for the zone change, to the City Council to approve changes zone 21-004 from OPNC2 to R3, perhaps as revised, and adopt the negative declaration. And I'm still here if you have any further questions.
A question, these are not on a state highway?
Yes, they are. State Street.
State Street, a state highway? It's San Jacinto Street that's a state highway.
Oh, okay.
It's San Jacinto Street. This is not a state highway on state. Yeah.
79 kind of does a weird little.
It goes into San Jacinto. San Jacinto wanted the state highway through its town, and it goes down. That's who's doing all the work on San Jacinto Street is Caltrans.
But don't worry, we're gonna have a realignment of 79 someday.
That'll solve it all.
Yeah.
Water district, no concerns too. I know that you said they have drought crisis that they had back in I think
Yes,
2005.
this is the extreme western edge of their district. This is Lake Hemet. And they have an ordinance in effect establishing a moratorium on new meters. The area north of Midlow is actually an Eastern Municipal Water District, and they've already done a water service plan for that, and it would be ready to go.
It'll be a process. They'll have to figure out where the water's coming from when it goes through that process. So, okay, any more questions for staff? No, we'll go ahead and open up public hearing. Any comments? Anything online, any Zoom, any comments?
I have no comments. Anyone on Zoom that would like to participate in public comment? I show no one responding.
Okay, great, thank you. Close public hearing. Thoughts, discussion, concerns? My main thing is that corner up there. If we
I
can-
think that's a good idea. We're gonna declare you to do the revised, so we can just second it.
Okay. Director Kane, can you help?
Sure. I would read it as, it is recommended that the planning commission adopt a resolution recommending that the city council approve and adopt a resolution to change the existing 33 assessor's parcel totaling approximately 24.93 acres from office professional to R3 north of West Menlo Avenue, and from general commercial C2 between West Menlo Avenue and Oakland Avenue to R3 multifamily residential that maintains consistency with the mixed use general plan designation. The APN for that town and country is 443-050-001, approximately 2 acres in size.
Great, thank you. So moved.
Second.
Make him the official motion, right?
That motion carries
Thank
4-0. Thank you. All right, next item, 6C for zoning ordinance amendment 21-007. Monique.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission and the public. I'm Monique Alanis Slater, project planner, presenting a zoning code amendment for parking exceptions for outdoor dining. This is a city initiated request. The property owners would be citywide in commercial zones. Throughout historically and recently through the COVID-19 pandemic, the city allowed for temporary use of outdoor dining areas subject to a temporary use permit. Since then, several businesses have taken the opportunity to utilize that allowance. And also since then, several communities across the country in response to COVID-19 pandemic restrictions have lifted restrictions, allowing for more flexibility for outdoor dining areas. The request is to allow and amend the zoning code to allow outdoor seating parklets for restaurants within existing parking lot spaces. This includes an allowance for parking, a 20% parking reduction to the existing criteria within the site with a commercial center. That's consistent with our current zoning code criteria for temporary use permits currently now. The parklet is a semi-permanent structure. And also this zoning ordinance amendment includes specific design guidelines. The intent of this ordinance is to offer support to our community businesses, as well as to provide a creative way of activating underutilized commercial development within the city, as well as an enjoyment of outdoor dining options for the community and the public. As mentioned, communities across the country have lifted their restrictions and have considered whether to maintain or remove outdoor dining and parking areas. And what we've seen is a trend of parklets in surrounding areas. A parklet is a semi-temporary restaurant seating area. It is constructed on a raised platform and located within an existing parking space. These are examples of parklets in Wisconsin. This one and the one to the south is New York City. These types of parklets have design features including deck, railing, shade, vegetation, landscaping, and ambient lighting. This is also an example of Palm Springs and the city of Santa Monica. The current illustration is a downtown parklet within the downtown village in the city of Laguna Beach, as well as a proposal in the city of Glendale. The proposed zoning ordinance amendment includes a temporary use permit process. The term of the temporary use permit is 1 year with the options of extension. It also requires written approval from the property owner, all properties and tenants of commercial properties abutting the or adjacent to the proposed outdoor seating parklet. The parklet must be designed for quick removal upon expiration of the permit. The location of the parklet would be located within an existing parking space within a commercial center along the frontage of a business, and that business being a bona fide restaurant, coffee shop, donut shop, ice cream, or other food eatery establishment. Parklets can also be located in public right-of-way downtown on-street parking spaces with, within the downtown setting due to a speed limit that's lower, and safety measures could be put in place to separate uses, as well as allow an extension of outdoor seating area for restaurants in the downtown. The parklets could be shared between tenants. Perhaps you have a breakfast shop in the morning and a evening dinner in the evening time. The purpose is to allow parklets citywide in commercial zones as well as specific plan areas. If the parklet is in the city right of way or a downtown parking area, that would require a revocable encroachment permit in addition to the parklet permit.
Just for clarity, the 30 miles an hour speed limit is a limit, not a target, right?
That is the recommended. I would also, that is the posted speed limit. I would also like to verify the speed limits within the city. From what I'm seeing, that the speed limit is 35. This was modeled after other communities, which may have speed limits of 30 miles an hour. So, but that is intended to be for properties that, or for on-street parking of, it's that would be the maximum.
Right.
speed limit.
So are we, I mean, does that give us an option to adjust that where we may have, like you say, most of we have a lot of 35, not 30.
Yes.
Would we adjust that to the 35, or is
Yes.
30 still the max? Okay. So it's
35.
just, it's intended to be kind of an upper limit. We're not going to have highway speed streets with restaurants, outdoor dining. Thank you.
The zoning code amendment includes parklet site standards. Primarily, the site would be within an existing parking space. A maximum of 2 spaces would be allowed or permitted for a parklet area. The 20% reduction in the parking criteria for the shopping center would be permitted. We would review that through the temporary use permit process. There would be a buffer requirement between the parklet and adjacent parking spaces, as well as travel lanes.
Is that, so a travel lane, would that be 3 feet buffer between a 35-mile-an-hour zone?
This would be, the 3-foot separation would be from a drive aisle. It could be increased if you did in a situation where there was on-street parking. We could increase that buffer. This is recommended as a baseline recommendation.
It just seems, I mean, but the city would have an opportunity with all of these projects that come in to look at them site specific and say, hey, this buffer needs to be greater or less. We're not establishing specific requirements with this action, correct?
Yes,
And if the commission would like, we can set a range that would best fit for whatever the project that comes forward in the future as a parklet. So you could have a range that says up to 35 miles an hour or at minimum of 3 feet separation or something like that, so that you have a range that can be adjustable. Yes.
other considerations are including, provisions that ADA parking not be removed. If it is removed as part of the temporary parklet, then it must be replaced within the center or on site. There also has to be an accessible path of travel to be maintained at all times, and not less than 4 feet. So no obstructions could be, it should not result in any obstructions to the existing sidewalks. We also look at life safety components. This would be reviewed by our development review committee as well, just to ensure that their conditions of approval are adhered to. It would require a building permit as part of, although it's a temporary structure, it would require permit issuance. If the applicant has a restaurant that includes ABC licensing, it would generally not include the outdoor seating area unless they obtain an ABC license for that, an extension for that area. But they would have to already have an existing ABC license in place.
Drink, have an alcoholic beverage outside this extension, they would have to get ABC's approval on that, or the city. Okay, on your phone.
Prohibited uses in the outdoor seating area include advertising and uses that would not typically be conducive for an outdoor seating area, such as no electrical plumbing connections, flashing lights, pop-up tents, food trays, or cooking outside in the outdoor seating area. However, if there's a temporary use or special event request, that could be permitted for a very temporary weekend type setting. However, the intent is for that not to be permitted in the parklet areas.
So when on the no electrical or plumbing connections, if you're going to have ambient lighting, how would you?
There are options for solar lighting. We could take a look at that. That is one area that we would have to take a look at and see if there's existing outlets nearby that would support lighting on that. It would be on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you're going to have, it'd be better to have safe lit areas and make sure you're not tripping over cords than to have dark areas. And so is that something then as well would be up to the city on a case-by-case basis to evaluate electrical?
Sure, we can do that. We only put that in there because of the difficulty in meeting the electrical and plumbing code that comes out of the building onto this area. So solar is a great option. A candlelight table would be a great option. Things of that sort that makes it enough lighting, but rather than trying to go through this expense of getting an electrical line or plumbing line across a sidewalk.
Is propane allowed? It's not really specified as propane.
Propane heaters could be allowed because they're self-contained components. So those could be something that we can include as part of something that they can utilize as part of outdoor seating area.
My thought is that on some of those examples that you showed, and hopefully what we're kind of getting to at some point would be some really nice outdoor areas to eat that might be a little more permanent than what we did as a result of COVID. And so I would want to maybe revise that to instead of saying no electrical or plumbing connections, is that any electrical or plumbing connections must meet applicable city codes and be approved by the city or anything, something that just gives that option if that's, if it enhances that, the experience there and can meet all the safety requirements.
To add to the gas or diesel generators or the propane, the fire department has reviewed this proposal, is in agreement that it would have to just be in compliance. Portable heating units would be in compliance with California Fire Code requirements.
On that next item, the flashing lights and excessive decoration, you're not saying no flashing lights and excessive decorations, you're saying they can have them?
This is all prohibited uses.
Oh, I got it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Up in the top left is prohibited
Yeah.
use, right? Okay.
Yes, this is due to traffic concern, traffic safety.
No fire, no fireworks, no sparklers. Go ahead.
The design standards, we're looking at, improving the area and to be more permanent and aesthetically pleasing. The overall elements for the design standards include criteria for the parklet base design, how the measurements and the height of the parklet base design, decking materials, colors. We're looking at, also engineering evaluated this and they wanted to make sure that it was included that, anytime it's drainage or stormwater, that they're designed to address that and not impede stormwater impacts. It includes railing and barrier criteria, quality of materials, enhanced and recommended landscaping, high quality furniture, lighting and misting, roof materials that are complementary as in these examples, shading and umbrellas as well.
Hard to have lighting and misting it'd be a lot easier to have lighting and misting with electrical and plumbing connections.
And finally, the provisions of the ordinance include maintenance responsibility as well as suspension, revocation, and removal if necessary.
Question. The prohibition, you had pop-up tents. So they could have a like a 10-foot area, because I'm thinking of, in the evening, if you're out to dinner at 6 o'clock, it's still pretty hot. So you said temporary.
We would like to see a more enhanced version of a pop-up tent. That's the goal, is that it would be more aesthetic and architectural. The pop-up tents that you see traditionally for a temporary use permit is not in alignment with what the parklet design is. However, it could be integrated with the parklet.
I'm thinking of some of the things we used to do, put the Ramona Bowl for our, our vendor pop-ups. We provided like the 20-foot wide pop-ups and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's
That weekend or
That weekend,
yeah.
but I'm thinking of, for what you're saying is that they could only do that temporary, and then you would be looking for something that was more permanent.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think, the idea here is to make this option more permanent and codify it in the city standards, but to make it nice and to make it not like we have a bunch of,
Pop-up tents.
What was the width? Is it a 2-car width that they were allowing?
Yes, so typically in 9 by 18 is one parking space size. So you could, the proposal is to allow no more than 2 to limit the size of the outdoor parklet area. Now that excludes the buffer areas, that you'd have to have those buffers within that space.
And are we just hoping that this will be a every year renewal and there's no end to this?
That's why they want it to look nice.
I know, but eventually they're using COVID measures right now, but when COVID is
Right.
done and over, they're gonna take it back.
Correct. So generally what this does is it provides some outdoor seating going forward without having the COVID as a requirement. Some of the restaurants have already taken that into consideration when they're designing new layouts. So they would have either sliding glass walls, folding walls so that they could make it indoor, outdoor. They're already incorporating porches or areas that they can set up within their property for extra seating and chairs that are seated outside and not have to rely on parklets in the future. These are really for those small businesses that are really limited on their options with either parking space or even open space areas, or like the business that would be in downtown areas. They don't have that opportunity unless we have this type of option. So it's not just for COVID duration, but it could go on indefinitely. However, because we want to make sure that these are in good standing, we want to make it 1 year permit so that we can evaluate every year to make sure that they're up to the current standards and not have collection of old materials that are dilapidating, breaking, splitting, things of that nature.
I would like to just add one correction in the ordinance. I included the maximum height is recommended at no higher than 12 feet for any roof structure or shading. That ended up in the maintenance and responsibility or suspension, revocation, removal section. I'd like to move that maximum height of any roof or shade structure not to exceed 12 feet in height. That language and transfer that into the site standards, and that would just be a correction. In this illustration, it also shows how the base is elevated above the driveway or the drive aisle, the parking area, and it is flush with the sidewalk area. And that's an example from the city of West Hollywood. The proposal is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, Section 15061B3, which provides the CEQA only applies to projects that have potential for causing a significant effect on the environment. There is no physical change to this text amendment. Advertising by the city was made in the press enterprise 10 days prior to this hearing on January 20th, 2022. No communication has been received in favor or in opposition. This concludes my presentation. It is respectfully requested or recommended that the Planning Commission adopt Planning Commission resolution finding that the project is categorically exempt, and recommend to the City Council approval of ordinance adopting zoning ordinance amendment 21-007 based on the findings outlined in the staff report.
Thank you. Any questions? Open up public hearing. Any comments? Anything online?
I have no comments. Anyone via Zoom would like to comment on this item? I don't have any responses.
Thoughts?
Real quick thought, real quick discussion. 30, is it 30 or 35 miles per hour we're trying to change that to?
Up to 30.
I believe it was up to 35 miles an hour.
So, because I remember reading, it says parking or a, there's another wording for another right-of-way area. So are we trying to include downtown is right by Harvard, kind of those restaurants in that little right-of-way area? Because I think that's, I don't know, it's just really risky right in that area to put people eating. But we're including that area there too, just right in downtown in that little pull-out area.
Correct. So the parklet ordinance does not exclude any area within the city limits.
that?
The parklet ordinance does not exclude any area within the city limit. So it would include anywhere in the city that has a commercial zoning designation.
I think that's a really tight spot right there.
Well, and I think, I mean, but with those two changes, we're saying up to 35 miles an hour and a minimum of 3-foot clearance. So then each individual project would come before the city and the city would evaluate any kind of safety issues, traffic, anything else, and make requirements on a project by project basis.
It's a one-way street, so it should be a little more.
No, just on Florida Avenue.
Oh,
On Florida Avenue, right in the front.
And I
there
mean,
where-
so I would assume, I mean, we don't have any there now, but I would assume that, like Ori's Cafe, when they did it around the back, you know.
Couldn't, you can't do it on the sidewalk because the sidewalk is owned by Highway 79.
Correct. So
Gotcha.
that, in the statement, it said you can't use city sidewalks, so you just. got
City
the whole area.
or,
So 3
and you
feet,
can't
there's no
use
way you
the
can-
Highway 79 because they won't let you.
Yeah, I like the idea of kind of setting some boundaries, but giving city staff the ability to evaluate each one based on its own issues. So if we say minimum of 3-foot separation, you know, if it's just an entryway into a alley or something, that might be sufficient. If it's a 25-mile-an-hour street, we might need, you know, more. I'm assuming each project would go through the DRC for review, so you'd have input from fire and police and everybody else. but-
Correct. I was just checking whether Florida Avenue in that downtown area, the speed limit, I can't find the speed limit sign, so I can't verify.
Well, it
Is it-
just depends.
Section 78 of these.
yeah, that's true. That is
I'm-
true.
Did I say that out loud?
Time of day. Day of the
On a
week.
record.
And propane is allowed, you're saying, HP?
I would say if it's,
Keep people warm or.
yeah, I would say if it's contained in a pre-manufactured heating unit or something like that, then I think those should be allowed.
70 Florida Avenue does have a speed limit. I'm sorry, it's not. Okay, so we have some minor modifications to it. We have the up to 35 miles an hour. We have the at minimum 3-foot clearance, and then we have the change of the building height or the structure height from one section to another section. Those are the only 3
You
changes.
also had the any electrical and plumbing must meet city requirements.
Yes, thank you.
Tired.
Well, he always was.
Second.
Is that sufficient for?
Yes, we have adequate information to go forward.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, you go around town, you have some that are done pretty nicely, some that not so much. So it would be nice to foster that, especially like weather like it's been the last couple weeks, kind of outside. So
Make the motion of what HP stated.
And I'll
Oh.
second.
we have a motion and we have a second with the changes and corrections as noted. Motion carries 4-0.
Could I get a first and a second?
Yes, we had a first with Jacob and a second with Cindy. Okay, next item. Zoning ordinance amendment 21-006.
But on this one, I'd like to point out that there's a mistake right below where it says ZOA 21-007. It is what we just passed up above. So see right there where it says ZOA under that?
Outdoor seating parklets. For this 21-006.
It should say ZOA 21-006, second story design.
I know I saw it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the link I'm sure works. It's just probably just the title.
From making the agenda. Okay, okay, okay. Gotcha.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the Planning Commission, Monique Alanis Slater. This is zoning ordinance amendment 21-006, city initiated proposal to amend various sections of section 90 of the Hemet Municipal Code for second story design criteria for residential construction. The properties would be citywide in the residential zoning districts. The background is that we've experienced residents have enjoyed historically the openness of surrounding property or vacant land adjacent to their rear yard. Many residents have voiced their concerns for new development adjacent to existing single-family homes. And the purpose of the zoning ordinance amendment is to mitigate privacy impacts, reduce mass and bulk as visualized from the existing single-story homes of new multi-story homes and additions, as well as to apply for a new construction when proposed adjacent to existing single-story homes. The overall template or outline of the ordinance includes design techniques to mitigate privacy through building envelope, reduce mass and scale, window placement, and minimizing sight lines into properties, as well as privacy planting and distance between structures. And these are the design techniques that we'll review in this presentation. So the ordinance is, the essence of it is broken up into different criteria where applicants or home builders can choose and select from different options that achieve the goal of privacy and mitigation. The first concept is the privacy in building envelope. And the privacy in building envelope can be looked at in terms of angles and sight lines and no build areas. So what we did is looked at different angles to see what the step back would be or how far an upper level two-story could be pulled back away from existing single-story homes. So in this example here, we have an existing single-story home to the left, and they're both on a lot of 6,000 square feet is the way that they were modeled. They both have 20-foot rear yard setbacks. And what we did was we looked at an angle of 25 degrees to start. And that's measured beginning at the rear property line of the new construction site. And what that achieved is a setback or stepped back. The second floor was stepped back approximately 23 to 24 feet behind the facade of the rear elevation and really pulls back the upper story. That is one of the most restrictive case scenarios that is included in this analysis. It's something that builders could choose. It's an option. We do have recommendations in the ordinance very specifically. But in this case, there's an example of one that a recent product type that we've approved in the city that has a similar type of design that meets the intent of the ordinance. And it provides for privacy. But in that case, there was no window placement along the rear elevation. However, in this evaluation, we want to look at allowing for upper floors but with unique privacy mitigation. We take a look at different options. So once we started at point A, which a 25-degree angle, and we moved forward. We went 30 degrees, 35, and then 40 degrees. The higher the degree, the closer the upper floor becomes to the existing single-story home. So looking at what those options provide. So just kind of going back to the first example being the most extensive criteria or conservative, would achieve approximately 63-foot separation from the upper floor to the existing single-story home. There would be an overall separation of 40-foot separation between the structures. And this is based off of your traditional 6,000 square foot lot and a 20-foot rear yard setback. Moving the angle up, we did see the change, the separation. As you go higher, the upper floor gets closer to the single story. So in these examples, at a 30-degree angle, you have the upper floor 15 feet, step back 15 feet. And at a 35-degree, you have an upper floor at 10 feet. So the closer and the higher the degree, the closer you are to the single story home and potential site visibility concerns. And lastly, this is the most the highest degree, which would be the 40-degree angle with a 5-foot step back. This could be an option that they selected. We could also have, we have other criteria that could also enhance privacy. In this case would be a 45-foot separation from between the two structures. Looking at the overall appearance as viewed from the existing single-story home from their backyard, our hope is that we can provide criteria to enhance and reduce the mass and scale and the appearance of mass and scale behind them of the new structure. Some cities provide guidelines and design guidelines, such as the city of San Mateo. On the left, they illustrate more or less what you see in a lot of the home build developments. But what is recommended is that consider, stepping back your upper floor to reduce that mass and scale.
So can you go back to that? Okay, so these are the front yard views
Yes.
from the curb.
Yeah, and this was an example used, and it could be applied both front elevation or rear elevation. This was just an example of how you can mitigate and reduce mass and scale visually. So you can require that along the front or the rear. And in this case, what we're looking at only is the rear elevations. Typically the fronts provide articulation. We've had good quality products that have come through with sufficient articulation and recessed and step back. But in this case, we're focusing only on the rear elevations, potentially the side elevations of homes that interface existing single-story homes. And as far as the rear elevation versus the side, there's also methods to pull back or pull back the side elevation to create a sense of privacy. In this example, you could look at it as the rear yard. This is really the side yard, and it's just showing how the overall building envelope can be reconfigured. Now, this is something we just want to offer as an opportunity to be flexible with our home builders, not to fully prescribe one requirement over the other, but to give them the opportunity to do an assessment and provide options for their development.
So is this going to be a requirement for them then, or are we just saying, hey, consider this?
These are requirements,
Okay.
And they'll have the opportunity to select from the following, that as long as they meet the intent of the there's also an opportunity for different methods of stepping back. We had the 45 or the 25-degree angle, 40-degree angle, that type of methodology for them to do their analysis for their sight lighting. Other cities have different, like the city of Beaumont. This is an example of how they require their interface with residential. The multi-story is a family development example, and they require it to be stepped back 15 feet on the third floor. So these are kind of just a concept of what stepping back criteria can look like. And this is another example of the city of Spokane, Washington. This was more of a commercial adjacent to residential. It's a very extreme example. But what I did was an example of what the city could do based on other criteria that I've seen in other zoning codes. We could apply a setback provision, and it's an option. They can choose the angled provision. They can do a setback option. So basically, starting at the rear property line, for every 1 foot in height of the building, you'd have to set back 2 feet. So that staircase kind of looking area is really ultimately a no build 2-story restricted area. So it would require them to have their product pulled back on the upper floor. And it would be up to them to figure out how that works for their product, as long as they're within the no build restricted area. That's just a component. It doesn't include other criteria that we would require. So in conjunction with those criteria that they could select, we would also ask that they include window and balcony placement, looking at the window configuration, clear story windows, high sill windows that would not allow for viewing out into existing single-story bedrooms. So that's the intent, is to maintain that privacy. And these are options that the city of Sunnyvale has included in their design guidelines to provide just a example of how window placement and landscaping and window configuration can mitigate privacy. Also, they could include privacy plantings. This is an example of existing windows. There would be a 30-degree angled sight line, and within that sight line, you would have to provide new trees and shrubs that would provide specifically, it would have to be a certain type of landscaping that the city would review to ensure that it would be appropriate for screening, and it would be essentially located where necessary on the property. In addition, the affected property owner could approve and they could choose to allow the planting on their property. So it could be either on the new construction property site or on the affected property owner behind them. This also includes recordation of a covenant for that landscape area, that there is a privacy clause or privacy and recorded with the county recorder's office.
So that would mandate that the homeowner is required to maintain, they have to water, irrigate, make sure the tree's in good shape.
That would be a deed restriction or a recorded covenant requirement, yes. And lastly, one of the criteria is, what is the minimum distance that the commission and wants to recommend to the council? What is the minimum distance between structures? Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be one distance, and as long as all other criteria are met, it's flexible. However, it's recommended thus far in this example, option C, where you have a 35-degree angle, it's stepped back And this provides with a 50-foot separation between the upper floor and the single story. And this is measured from the upper floor to any bedroom within the existing single story home, unless window orientation and design visibility is achieved. So we'll be looking at those different criteria to see where they fit. This concludes my presentation. The proposal is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, Section 15061B3, which provides that CEQA only applies to projects that would have a potential cause and effect, significant effect on the environment. There is no physical project or physical change. We advertised, the city of Hammond advertised in the press enterprise on January 20th, 2022. No communication was received in favor or in opposition to the project. It is respectfully recommended that the Planning Commission adopt Planning Commission resolution finding that the project is categorically exempt, and recommend to the City Council approval of Ordinance Zoning Code Amendment 21-006 based on the findings outlined in the staff report. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yes. Thank you for trying to work on this problem. I appreciate it especially. I personally would like to also see something that includes a concerted effort to put a higher number of single stories in their planning that would be against the other single story residences. So in other words, what this seems to do is just really particularly address 2 stories that are going in adjacent to single stories, and how those 2 stories need to be designed in order to mitigate that visibility. And could there be something included in this that would require a certain number, or I don't know, percentage, or I don't know how we could get to it, but a lot of these builders will build 2-story as much as they can and forget the single story because they get the money. The money is more in demand on the 2-story. It's more square footage on a smaller space. So is there anything that could include having the single stories included in their plans, and having the higher amount like we did on the Citrus Point that you did, to be adjacent to the single story, so that there will be in the future a modicum amount, a way to have at least a higher amount of single stories adjacent to the other single stories. Can that be a part of this ordinance, or would that need to be something that came back?
I'd add to that question. Is that something that we can do from a
Zoning ordinance? I mean, you did it.
Legal what happened on those other projects was really the developer
Agreed to do it.
working with the community, right?
If you have an ordinance that requires it, then they have to do it. And they
Right,
do
but
that.
then does that then impact the the profitability if the 2 stories are selling?
Profitability our problem.
Well, it's if it's not profitable, they're not going to build, right? And so it's finding that if like you say, they're getting the money for the 2 stories, we're definitely moving from a state perspective into a higher density, more constant, ADUs, everything else, more concentration. We're being forced that direction. My concern would be that we are limiting, and I guess that this to add on to your question. So first, the question is, can we do something like that? And then secondly, as part of this analysis, was there anything, was there a look at the impact that this would have on the current, any kind of tentative maps that are out there right now in terms of plans? I mean, did we take a look at, for example, maybe some of the previous projects that just went through and said, hey, if we provided this alternative to them, what would that impact in terms of their mix of single and two-story homes? So kind of a two-part question.
Uh,
So, did you get that 8-part question?
Chair, would you mind if I took a chance at responding to some of this?
Oh, yes, please.
In terms of Commissioner Van Arsdale's question, why not simply have an ordinance that requires that all new construction adjacent to existing single story also be single story? Our analysis concluded that we would have difficulty in defending the legality of such a requirement in the face of state requirements related to housing. So if we did something like that, it may be an undue restriction on the ability to build housing. And one of the issues that we have is these two-story houses are consistent with the zoning code that we have in place in these communities when we're talking about maximum building height. So the idea of putting together this ordinance was a way to balance those community concerns, those privacy interests of existing homes against the need to ensure that adequate housing can be built. I think that what we're likely to see is either housing products being proposed by developers that will adequately address privacy concerns by having the windows at certain heights, by having setbacks of the second story, and by having privacy planting. Or if those sort of requirements, that isn't something that they want to do, I think what they'll be proposing is what we've seen on other projects, which is the adjacent lots are the single story product, and then the interior and moving away, you start getting into the 2 stories.
So if we couldn't have an ordinance that said, I'm going by percentage or here, is like, say, for instance, if you had a builder that had 2 single-story models and 3 or 4 two-story models, that we would say that your street that butts up against single stories, and that way it wouldn't have to keep coming back and everybody get up in arms about it and everything else. But you say, okay, on the street where you're adjacent to the single story, you have X percentage of your single story product, where you get more single story against single story. And then, like you just mentioned, that as you pull away from that area and then are within the new development, then they can have it and mix it up like they want. But when
Right.
you're intruding upon the other single stories that had been there for a long time, and some of them didn't have an expectation of other single stories being behind them, like the Citrus Point did, because that specifically had CCNRs for single story. But so is there a way you can figure out a percentage or something where you could get more of the single stories adjacent to the single stories?
I certainly think that it is possible for the city to express that as a preference, that we want to see a good mix of single story and second story products. The issue from the legal perspective was, with recent changes in state law, when we are talking about ordinances that affect the ability to construct housing, we have to be careful that we are not creating an ordinance that unduly restricts the existing ability of a developer to build housing. And that includes essentially prohibiting swaths of otherwise developable land from having this product. whereas the ordinance that you have in place now addresses the privacy interests, or at least attempts to address those privacy interests while still, allowing that product to continue. But again, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. My expectation is that we're either going to see products coming forward during design review that won't have the same level of privacy concerns that the commission has seen before. Or, like I said, I mean, staff is constantly communicating with developers. Developers have seen the public hearings that have gone on with the city. They may decide that, we're already going to have a mix of single families. We're going to put them on that sort of border. And then we don't even have to deal with this design guideline ordinance because, we'll be able just to build the models that we already have plans for.
Thank you. Second question on those that you showed the windows on the side. Was that the windows on the back? I'm assuming where it was sloped up, so you had single story going up to 2-story. The windows on the back side of that property would be no windows, or they would work with that line of sight portion that you talked
On the
about.
35-degree angle one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's going to be options. We could look at is that you have a choice to have a minimum distance between the upper story from the upper story to a existing single story bedroom. If you want to limit or provide a minimum separation for someone to have their 2-story and have a bedroom on the upper floor, there's that option. If you want, there could be a 50-foot separation, there could be more separation, or there could be other criteria to require additional screening. So it's not necessarily one criteria over another. We do recommend that the home builder fully analyzes the sight lines, the window configuration on how that could potentially impact privacy. And where we see, I guess you would say, where we see a weakness or where we see potential for a problem based on the siting of the property, that is where more criteria could be required, such as the landscaping, such as higher clear story windows, or other mitigation.
And on the landscaping, we all know that it takes a while for your trees to grow, so you have that privacy. So would you have minimum size, box size requirements for those being put in so that they're already getting close? I mean, they're already bigger. Instead of planting a 15-gallon tree, you might go up to the other sizes. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, we could definitely put a size limit on the or minimum size requirement for trees as a screen tree.
Screen tree would take a while to be a screen. Okay.
Questions?
I agree more specifically with, I think like the 35-degree angle would be, you're not going to get too many complaints because there's no back window looking into their yard. That gives the developers a chance to open up a second story where they want to put along single existing stories. So I'm more in favor of like a 35-degree angle along existing property line, single story track. So it gives them the chance to build that 2-story that they want to build, but it's not going to be butt up right against the backyard of a single story neighbor.
Whatever minimizes it the most and is reasonable is, yeah. And like what he said a while ago, they might choose to put more single stories so they don't have to deal with the, is
Yeah.
this 35? Is this 35? Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead and open up public hearing. Any comments? Anything online? Any e-comments?
I have no e-comments. Is there anyone on the Zoom call that would like to participate in public comment? I don't show anyone.
Close public hearing, so I think it's brilliant, and I think it's a great way to put in place some criteria to allow city to work with developers on a preemptive. I understand your specific sensitivity to this to this issue, considering recent development in your neighborhood. And full disclosure, I don't have that issue because large piece of land, so I don't have a concern. But what I like is that the city has went through the effort of looking at all the other cities around to look at different alternatives that would work, and allowing the development of product that is marketable for our community, but still takes into consideration privacy issues of existing residents. And I would encourage the city to, like was discussed, is to have those communications with the builders, based on previous hearings and concerns from the community, and also, when you're implementing this criteria, focus on the engineered solutions versus the reliant on screenings. Screenings don't always stay, right? But if you design in an engineering solution that keeps the windows from looking down into people swimming in their pools or whatever else, then you're going to have a much more long-term solution to it. So
Size of backyards, the 6,000, I'm actually a quarter acre. Yeah, I'm a cul-de-sac, so it's my square footage equals a quarter acre, but it's kind of side yard angled. The direct adjacency is shorter, but for those that are just a plain 60 by 100 lot, or however they are, and they have the kind of narrow portion, it really affects a lot. And I really appreciate you guys tackling this. Thank you.
Anything else? Any thoughts? So we only have one modification to the ordinance, right? And that's just for a minimum size tree. What tree well? Tree.
It's minimum. They go by gallons. The tree minimum. So you have sizes that are 15 gallon. I don't know.
Correct. The typical for trees is inch boxes. So
Yeah,
it will be
sizes or
24-inch box trees are pretty adequate, and they do grow at that point pretty quickly. So
the caliper of the
Mhm.
because they can move a 15 gallon into a much bigger box and call it that, but I think you need to include the caliper on the tree. Yeah, see, that's a 100-gallon tree, and it's a twig.
Yeah, it doesn't matter about how big of a bucket.
Get there, but yeah.
Yeah.
So is a 24-inch box tree satisfactory to the commission?
What does that mean in terms of
Average
height?
height
What's
of
the
that.
time frame to? I mean, I guess my suggestion would be we let the city make that determination with the intention of having a privacy within a certain amount of time. So I suppose it depends on the tree and what do you say, caliber?
Caliper, the diameter.
Caliper, gotcha.
Isn't that caliper? I can't remember. I used to help at, I sold that nursery out at Bayou on Newport Road. I'm the one who sold that to them years ago and hung out there as they developed.
Okay, so if there's no other discussion on this, I move that we adopt Planning Commission resolution and find that the project is categorically exempt from CEQA, and recommend that the City Council approve ordinance adopting zoning ordinance amendment number 21-006 with the addition of the minimum size tree based on the objective of having privacy in a reasonable amount of time. based on the findings outlined therein.
We have a question from staff.
Thank you.
And just for clarification, the commission agrees to the 35-degree angle option, option C, whereas the ordinance indicated 40 degrees recommended. That could be corrected to 35 degrees.
Yes. Yes. Confirmed. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Sorry. Oh, mine wasn't lighting up, sorry.
Motion carries 4-0. All right. Item 7, city attorney reports.
No report, just appreciation for the commission in dealing with having a disembodied head speaking to you over Zoom today. I appreciate you working with us as we deal with COVID in our office. Thank you.
Yeah, stay safe.
Thank you. Community development reports.
Sure. At the city council meeting of January 25th, they have approved the housing element. So that is going forward to HCD as a second revision. So hopefully we'll have a certified housing element relatively shortly here. Thank you. That's all we have.
Long haul, wasn't it?
All right. Future agenda items.
So tagging on to that item, in the future, we'll be seeing the safety element update coming before you. Again, this will have to come before this body, review, make any adjustments and corrections, recommendations, and we'll forward on to city council for its recommendation and adoption. Commissioner Lemke?
No reports other than the chamber is having their first Friday at Ramona Bowl this Friday at 8 a.m. Breakfast will be served.
Commissioner
That is all.
Commissioner Beefsterfer?
Not to report.
Commissioner Vice Chair Van Arsdale? And Chair Wood?
Nothing to report. So if there is nothing more, then we will be adjourned until March 1st.
No.
Yes, we don't have an item ready for you for the 15th of February, so it will be March 1st.
I suppose I should have read the next line on the agenda. Sorry. All right. Well, with that, thank you very much.
All right, all in session, all mics off.